Bulavanaka, Fiji. Welcome to Speak Your Mind on Gold FM and FBC TV. I'm Rita Narayan. Our guest today is Mrs. Arieta Modeda, Director for Women at the Ministry for Women's Social Welfare and Poverty Alleviation, and we'll be talking about various developments in the department, including projects, etc., that have had an impact on women. Mrs. Modeda, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Rita.
Now, firstly, if we could just begin with you talking about the role. What exactly is the role of the Department of Women within the ministry?
The Department for Women is the gender advisor to government through the work of our policy papers through our minister. We're also responsible for gender mainstreaming in government programs and projects. We also implement income-generating projects and other projects and programs under the 5 thematic areas of our 10-year Women's Plan of Action. The overall aim really is to empower women. And in the process of empowering women, livelihoods, families, communities are improved, and poverty is reduced to a negligible level as per the People's Charter. Thank you.
Okay. Now, before we carry on, we were talking about specifically the Women's Plan of Action for 2010 and to 2019. There was one plan of action from 1999 to 2008. Now, how different is this one from the new one, from the previous one?
Thank you, Rita. Let me tell you a bit about the Women's Plan of Action and where it's come out of. If you recall, there was the 4th World Conference on Women in Beijing in 1995. All the women's ministers were there, the whole world, and anyone that had anything to do with gender who could afford to be there were there. After that meeting, the Pacific Ministers for Women came into the Pacific and organized by the SPC. They organized the Pacific Women's Ministers meeting, and out of that, the Pacific Plan of Action, Women's Action, was drawn up. Then countries were free then to pick and choose areas of critical concern to them. So there were about 13 areas of critical concern out of the Beijing Platform for Action. Fiji chose 5 that were pertinent issues for us at the time. They were review of laws that are disadvantageous to women, eliminating violence against women, women's social and economic livelihoods, women and the law. There was a 5th one, I can't recall it right now, but that 10-year plan of action ran from 1999 to 2008, and I believe Fiji was the only Pacific Island country at the time that had a plan of action and a 10-year one. Now, at the end of 2008, in 2009, there was a review done by Dr. Vanessa Griffin, and that then gave us the current plan of action. But out of it, they basically said, these are some things that have been achieved. These are some things that continue to need work on. And they gave us the 5 new thematic areas, which is formal sector employment and livelihoods. We still have the elimination of violence against women and girls. From the old plan of action to this one, it shows it's still an area of concern. Equal participation of women in decision making, women and the law. And the 5th one, which is a new one, is access to services. The 5 sub-themes are health and HIV and AIDS, education, and water and infrastructure.
Thank you, Mrs. Modeda. What would you say are the core priority areas in the new plan of action?
The core priority areas are the 5 thematic areas that I've just talked about. But right now, because if you're looking at you would have seen a lot of the work done by our minister with regards to the zero tolerance violence-free communities. There's a lot of determinants for violence, but one of them is poverty. And so I would say 2 of the major ones we're focusing a lot of our finances on is the income-generating projects, which is the 1st thematic area, women's livelihoods and NGO grants, and the 3rd thematic area, which is the elimination of violence against women and children. Those are, I think, the 2 of our flagship programs at the moment. Not to say that we're neglecting the others.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Anna, you are on Speak Your Mind on Gold FM, and if you have any questions for Mrs. Modeda about the Department for Women or any of the projects or initiatives that they are involved in, you can email your questions to goldfm@fbc.com.fj, and we're also on Facebook on Gold FM Fiji, and you can also call us on 3220-906 or 3220-907. Now, Mrs. Modeda, if we could just talk about some of if we're looking in particular at women and the law, and there was some review carried out, and what is the result of the review?
Thank you, Rita. The last Women's Plan of Action, 1999 to 2008, that was one of the thematic areas, review of laws that are disadvantages to women. That task force reviewed the laws all across government policies. And out of that, we now have decrees that this current government has passed. We've got the domestic violence decree, we've got the crimes decree, we've got the sentencing and penalties decree, we've got the child welfare decree. We also have the family law bill of 2004. We have the employment relations promulgation of 2007. Now, these are all very gender responsive, and they have really come out of the work of that interagency task force from the previous Women's Plan of Action. But this government is carrying this forward. We have just submitted our follow-up report to the CEDAW committee. If you know, Fiji is the only country in the Pacific that's on track with its reporting obligations under CEDAW. Every 4 years, a nation that's ratified CEDAW has to report. We've submitted our 4 reports. Our 5th one is due next year. Now, after the 4th report, there was some follow-up comments from the CEDAW committee, and we've just done our responses to that, and that was done under the consultancy of Madam Nazat Shamim, and that should be going to the CEDAW Secretariat shortly. So we are on track with our international obligations and reporting commitments. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take a short break and we'll be back in a moment. Welcome back to Speak Your Mind on Gold FM and FBC TV. I'm Rita Naran, and our studio guest today is Mrs. Arieta Modeda, and we're talking about various developments in the Department of Women. Now, Mrs. Modeda, you did mention the Women's Plan of Action. There are 5 key thematic areas. This is the Plan of Action from 2010 to 2019. The first one being the formal sector employment and livelihoods. Could you talk about some of the projects that the ministry has initiated that covers this area?
Thank you, Rita. Under the Livelihoods Program, we actually have a financial facility for women's groups. Now, they have to come as women's groups. We do not give to individuals. And a women's group, be it a village women's group, a church, a faith-based one, could be a Muslim women's group from a settlement. They will have to first register with the nearest Department for Women, and our staff will help them develop their project proposal. And so we've funded things like virgin coconut oil processing, bakeries, canteens, poultry projects to really help the women's groups financially.
Mm-hmm. Now, we understand that the ministry has been quite instrumental in getting women's networks going and getting these little women's groups together. And if for women to network, to form little groups, so that they are able to access these various projects that are available for them through the ministry.
Well, it's important for women to work in collaboration, and our sister organizations, the social welfare, have funding for individuals, but for the ministry, it's a women's group. And the thinking behind it is women in partnership or women in collaboration are a stronger force to reckon with, but they also can assist each other. Imagine a women's group in a village. If a few of them have small children, they can share the child minding. Or if there's a women's resource center that's built for them, 3 of them or 5 of them can go and produce the product on 1 or 2 days, whilst the others help mind the children. So it's really keeping that idea of community going for them. But more importantly, we're taking the products, the projects, and the resource centers to the women in the villages to prevent them coming into town. Because you'll understand, the husbands will not allow them to come. There's little children, but if the resource centers, the resources are close by there, if it's taken to them, all we have to really work at now is ensuring the conduit to the market.
Mm-hmm. So what can they find at these women's resource centers?
It depends on the area where it's built. For example, I think the most successful one for us now is the Mau Women's Resource Center that the Honorable Prime Minister just opened last Monday. Now, as you know, Mau is a coastal community, and so in collaboration with the government of Indonesia, 4 expert trainers came in last year, and they're here again this year, and they're teaching the women and youth, how to plant healthy seaweed, how to harvest them properly, and to value add to them. At the moment, they're being exported. Dried seaweed is being exported to China and other markets. But we're looking at value adding. And so when the Prime Minister opened Mau Women's Resource Center last week, he was surprised to also taste the products that have been made out of seaweed, namely sausage, vakalavalava, seaweed mixed with tapioca, seaweed juice, and there was noodles, there was tomato sauce. But Mau will also learn this week, they're learning how to make skincare products and bath soap out of seaweed. So that is that. In Buretu, you've got the coconut shell craft, and there was another Indonesian trainer there last week. He was also here last year. So these women have gotten training in how to make, quality jewelry out of coconut raft. The same thing has been done in Wayevo. So depending on the natural products closest to the center, we're bringing in the relevant expertise to teach the women how to use it effectively and turn it into cash.
And what about for women, particularly who don't live in the coastal areas but are more inland? What sort of resources can we see coming out of there?
Well, in Nasalia, for example, up in Etasiri, there's right now there's a building that's going to be added to the building that we already have there, but that'll be built by the provincial development so that it can house the machine to turn root crops into flour. So that's the plan for Nasalia. So again, it's the root crops around there, whatever's available around the community to prevent the women traveling out, prevent also the extra cost of importing raw products.
And are the communities required to contribute anything towards the setting up of the resource centers?
Yes, for the resource centers, the communities have to provide unencumbered land and they have to provide labor so that they own it. And the ministry provides up to the value of building material, up to the value of 26,000 because that's according to the template we have. I suppose with transportation now, it goes about 27, 28,000, but roughly around that figure. It's just building materials, and then it is their responsibility to see it to completion and provide the women for it, for the working of the products in the center.
And is there sort of a number of centers that you're looking at to be set up by the end of this year? Is there?
Well, when Madam Minister went to Cabinet to ask for the centers, she'd asked for 20 for the next 3 to 5 years so that there'd be one in every province and then 6 in the settlements for the other races. So at the moment, we have about 13. There's 9 already open. Then there have been extensions. When the centers started to go up and the women around the country started to see what it was doing, they wanted, you had villages coming. And so we, don't have the funds to give women's resource centers to the value of 26,000. So what we've done is, if you already have an existing village hall, we can give you materials up to the value of $5,000 to add an extension, and that's going to be specifically for women. So we've opened more than 10 around the country, the most recent one being in Sangani that Madam Minister opened about 2 weeks ago.
So by the sounds of it, you're getting the whole communities to support these resource centers because they've seen the value of it, to the changes that it's making to the different communities.
I think the wonderful thing that we're seeing now is that the men are really behind it. I give Sangani as an example. When I went in there to do the initial negotiations, Bully Sangani was the one leading it, not the women. And he was telling the women, listen, this is something I asked Prime Minister for. Prime Minister has told Minister for Women, you women have to really, get your act together and get in behind this. So when you have the Vanua chief behind it, when you have the men behind it, it makes a big difference. And Sangani's extension was done under 2 months compared to some that we've had around the country that are still ongoing. And it's because, there's been problems at the community level between the villages. But it's so important to get the stakeholders on board right at the word go.
And is that support that you've seen with these, the setting up of these resource centers, is that sort of translated towards the setting up of zero-tolerance, violence-free communities? Because you have had a number of these villages that have been declared violence-free zones.
It is a very critical part of the process. To get from commitment to declaration is a process of about 6 to 8 months, and some take even a year. It's because you got to deal with the mindset. But one of the key critical components of the zero-tolerance, violence-free communities is the Gatekeepers Committee. And that committee is made up of the church leaders, the youth leaders, the women's leaders. They also have on board the community policing person in charge in the area, our Department for Women Staff, and other government agencies. And they then decide, the timings, how long it'll take from one phase to another. We bring in the expertise. We use Fiji Women's Crisis Center to do the gender-based violence training. We've used Dr. Siti Yanuyanutawa to talk to the men about anger management. But it's really dealing with mindsets, and you can't deal with mindsets overnight. And I guess that's been part of the success of the program is the buy-in of the community.
Thank you. We'll take a short break and we will carry on with the discussion in a moment. Welcome back to Speak Your Mind on Gold FM and FBC TV. I'm Rita Narayan, and once again our studio guest today is Mrs. Arieta Modeda, Director for Women at the Ministry for Women, Social Welfare and Poverty Alleviation. And if you do have any questions for Mrs. Modeda, you can email us on goldfm@fbc.com.fj and also post your questions on Gold FM Fiji on Facebook. And you can also call us on 3220-906 or 3220-907. Now, Mrs. Modeda, before we went to the break, we were talking about the Zero Tolerance Violence-Free Community campaign that is being carried out, that has been conducted by the ministry in collaboration with the different stakeholders. Now, can you talk about the advantages of this campaign in the different areas that have been set up?
Well, thank you. Thanks, Rita. First of all, one of the most important advantages for this, it's the collaboration between the government agencies. So it's between the Department for Women Staff in the field, the community policing, Itauke Affairs, provincial development, because you're taking it into the villages, but you're also taking it into the settlements. We haven't had much success with the settlements, and it's really, some of the feedback we're getting is in some of the settlements, the men aren't that open to having the program. But in the villages, the men have been quite open. And I think a lot of it has to do with the media awareness around it, not only by the department, by the police force, also in their messages. So you have the government agencies going in. You also have what you call the gatekeepers committee, who are really taking ownership. But it's a program that also gets people to look within. It's not just something where you come and give them pen and paper and have a workshop and tick the boxes. No, people really have to start to challenge their preconceived ideas about the role of women. And this is where one of the phases is the actual training by those who provide gender-based violence training. But prior to any of that, there's a whole lot of consultation that happens between the police and the community, the gatekeepers and our department staff. And it's not forced upon them. The community have to say yes. We want to commit. They'll get a certificate. And they say, we're committing to explore issues of violence, why it's happening. We're committing our people to partake of the workshops that you're going to bring in. That's all they're committing to. Whether they want to declare at the end of it or not is really their choice. And that's why it takes 6 to 8 months, and some have taken more than a year, I think almost 2 years for one in particular. Mm-hmm. But for this one that took almost 2 years, what we've been told by the police is the crime rate has really dropped. There's no reports of crime from that area. And we'd like to think it's because people actually challenging their beliefs, they're challenging their behavior, they're asking themselves why they do the things they do. So I think that's one of the pluses of this program, the Zero Tolerance. Now, having said that, we have a interagency task force under this thematic area at the ministry that's made up of all the government agencies I've just mentioned, but they also include the Crisis Center, Empower Pacific, Medical Services Pacific, SPC, RRRT, UN Women, UNFPA, AUSAID. Mm-hmm. And what they've told us is, we've had this program for 5 years. We'd like to review it. And so that review is currently underway. Not only is this program under review, also the Fiji Police Force's no-drop policy. It's always important for us to take a step back and say, okay, how far have we come? What are the successes? What are the not-so-successful stories? And what lessons can be learned? So by the end of this quarter, we should have a report back by the little subcommittee that's chaired by the Fiji Women's Crisis Center on the review of this very program that we're talking about.
Well, what are some of the comments, observations that you're getting from the members of the communities themselves that have implemented this campaign on the zero tolerance violence free community?
I think why we decided to have this, for the longest time, we've always preached to the victims, telling the victim, go and report on this, do that. Women often, more often than not, do not want the marriage to break up, nor do they want their husband behind bars, especially now with the domestic violence decree. If a woman is beaten up, the employer, the medical professional she goes to, they have an obligation under the law to report it, whether the victim wants to or not. More often than not, women don't want their husbands going behind bars or don't want to lose their breadwinner. But the violence has to be dealt with, and that's why this program is to get the cultural leaders, get the church leaders, get the vanua, get the men to explore the myths about women's roles and responsibilities, explore all these, false perceptions about how a woman should behave. What is machoism? How does a man show his authority in the house? Not through violence. So these programs and the gender-based violence training that goes in actually addresses these things, and even anger management, stress management, simple things like that. And then we have our income generating project. One of the phases is that the women's group will have to apply, and our staff assist them for an income generating project, so that the women's group is actually generating a little bit of income.
Now, you did mention that one of the challenges was the promotion of these campaigns in the settlement areas. Now, have you had to revise your approach to these settlements?
At the moment, we're looking at the approach that we're taking with the villages as opposed to the approach we take into the settlements. We've got one settlement that's, declared, but it's going to take, it's just realizing that'll be a bit of a longer pathway, talking to different stakeholders and, different messengers to front up. At the end of the day, people have to want that change. People have to want it so badly. And just going back to your previous question, you can't continue to preach and support the victim. You have to support the perpetrator as well. More often than not, they have been victims of abuse. Other than that, it's just the way things have been done. They've only seen their fathers doing it, their uncles doing it. They think it's right. But until they start to hear it from the pulpit, that it is against God's word, until they start to hear it from the temples and the mosques, these behaviors, will take a very, very long time to change. And it's how we raise our children as well, not allowing our sons to beat our daughters or, to bully in school. So it's a whole mindset change and it's behavior change that doesn't happen overnight, but it will happen with, with strategic direction and support and commitment by all the parties and the stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, let's talk about the solar electrification project that's run by the barefoot engineers, and there've been quite a lot of positive reports on this project. Give us an update on that.
Well, you all know that the 10 grandmothers went overseas. If you go on the website, Barefoot College trains illiterate, semi-literate to illiterate women. They don't train qualified women. And the whole philosophy is, no matter whether you can read or write, you must own development. You are a human being, you are worth living on earth, and you have a right to have water and electricity. So they've trained semi-literate to illiterate women to go and be development engineers in their communities. They've taken them from all around India, from Africa and other developing countries. Now, from last year was the first time they got the participants from the Pacific. I think they got one from Kiribati, one from Tonga, and 10 from Fiji. They will take maximum 2 from any country. Fiji for the first time, and for the first time they took 10 women. And these villages are all, they all have lights on. And the minister has gone around commissioning, these solar lights.
Okay. All right, we'll take a short break and we'll be back more on the discussion on this very interesting project by the Barefoot Engineers on the solar electrification project. Welcome back to Speak Your Mind. I'm Rita Narayan, and our guest today is Mrs. Arieta Modeda, Director for Women at the Ministry for Women, and we're talking about various developments in the department. And before we went to the break, we were talking about the solar electrification project by the Barefoot Engineers. Now, Mrs. Modeda, you did mention that of all the participants that went from Fiji, they've come back, all their villages now have electricity.
Yes. They were also provided, courtesy of UN Women. When the women grandmothers went across to India, they were actually told to take the number of households in their villages. So Nayoti, for example, Nayoti in Kandavu had 13 homes. One of the villages in Madhuwata had 42 homes. So they took those numbers. UN Women purchased those panels. So the women came in, they got back last September. The panels arrived in April. And so they came in for their national workshop and they went back to their villages with the panels, and all those panels have gone up, and the women have actually trained young people in their villages to help them put the panels up. And these grandmothers have their workshops, and that was the agreement when Bunker Roy came in last year, was that the women would, the village would provide a solar committee that would then be responsible for collecting money to pay the solar grandmother and to keep some for maintenance, but they would also provide the solar grandmother with a workshop to be able to house her equipment. And so if you saw close up a few nights ago on Sunday night, you would have seen the grandmother up in Mbowono, busy in her workshop. And it's exciting, it's revolutionary, to have an uneducated, so-called uneducated woman doing something that a lot of us who are university educated wouldn't know the first thing about. But that is what development is about. It's about people, owning their solutions and not looking to handouts. These people can do things for themselves. And so with those panels, they've got 3 lights. So each home has 3 lights with those panels. Yeah.
So what is some of the feedback that we're getting back from the communities and the women that are now in these villages that are now lit up?
Well, we started to get calls the moment the Williams and Gosling trucks rolled into the villages. We heard from Oikumbukumbu. They did the Fijian ceremony of Dere, when they revi the truck, and they had the big taralala, they had a big feast. And even wherever ministers gone, the women have just been so thankful because these villages are off the FEA grid. They will not be getting electrification other than through this means. And so that's when Bunker Roy came. He, at the global level, Barefoot College has an agreement with the LAMA, locally managed marine areas, and UN Women. And so when they came into Fiji, they got in touch with the Fiji chapter of LAMA, FLAMA, and used their community profiling to find which villages had the slimmest chance of getting the FEA grid out to them. And those were the villages that were chosen. And people have been asking, why 4 in Kandavu for the Eastern Division and nowhere else? Well, they were the areas covered by FLAMA at the time of the community profiling and at the time that Bunker did come through. Now, if this project is successful, there's a possibility of rollout and, we can look for those funds. But these 10 villages are really the pilots, and everybody, all eyes are on them to ensure that they are sustainable. And it'll come down to the committees, the village committees. They got to own it. We let go. We cannot be micromanaging that.
Mm-hmm. And again, what sort of contributions are the villages required to make anything towards ensuring this project is sustained?
Yes, they've agreed to $5 a household a month towards that goes into the village solar committee account, and out of it the solar committee then determines what to pay the grandmother and what is kept for maintenance of the equipment. And so it's early days yet. They've just all gone up and they've just all commissioned and yes, and enjoying the fruits of it.
Mm-hmm. Now you mentioned that the requirement is that there are 2 per country. Now, how were we able to get 10?
You know what? I found this out from the Director of Political Treaties at Foreign Affairs. I was talking to him on Friday about something else, and he said, it's so important that whatever little we can give to the UN coffers or even to other UN agencies, they go a long way. And so he said when he was still in New York, they had given some money to UN Women. And soon after that, this whole negotiation started. And hey, presto, we got the 10. So we'd like to think that it was because of that little contribution that our mission had made. But even till this day, people are still amazed that we managed to get 10 from Fiji. I must say also, our minister is a very intelligent, hardworking woman. So I'm sure Bunker, that did his research and found that this is one minister that will get the job done and will ensure the project, is seen to completion.
Mm-hmm. And long-term plans for Barefoot College here in Fiji?
Yes, there are plans in the pipeline. at the moment, I'm not at liberty to discuss it, but when that does go through, our minister will be making the announcement.
Mm-hmm. So you have received numerous queries from other villages and settlements.
Yes. Yes, for solar projects.
Okay. Now, let's talk about these interagency on elimination of violence against women and children. You did mention that there was a review that was ongoing.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the new policies and programs that are being considered?
At the moment, the task forces are developing, and with the help of a consultant as well, a national gender policy, a gender-based violence service protocol, and that service protocol will have to be the guiding document for service providers, from medical to education officers to the department staff. The also service mapping and service directly will be part of that, but the bigger part of it will be what will come out of the review will then determine, what else is needed. But I think the biggest thing for us is the national gender policy and the gender-based violence service protocol.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk about one of the thematic areas is equal participation in decision making? What is the work that's involved in this, and as far as the department is concerned, what is being done in that area?
With the equal participation of women in decision making, it's really looking at the quality of women on decision making bodies at all levels, right from the Tikina level all the way up to Parliament. Now, at the provincial level or at the the Yasana level, we've just had a meeting with Itoke Affairs, and they're rolling out training for their village chiefs, but they've also asked us to run some training with the Randini Vanuas so that women can assert themselves. These women have a lot of intelligence. They have a lot of value, a lot of knowledge, but they they're always suppressed. On the other hand, the avenues are opening up and they need to assert themselves. That's one. The other, now with the lead up to elections, we've just finished the rollout of the Bridge program, and that was funded by UN Women last year. There was a whole lot of trainers trained. Now this year, the ministry has fully funded that using the locally trained trainers. We've run 2 trainings in the West, 1 in the Central, 4 in the Northern Division, and there's 3 upcoming for the Eastern Division. So what it's doing, it's really training women and youth, one, to think for themselves, to vote as their conscience dictates and not as dictated by, people in authority over them, but also to look at policies, to really think intelligently about the kind of government they want, the kind of governance that they want. And so that's what, I think one of the biggest things we're doing under that thematic area right now, Rita.
Okay, thank you very much, Mrs. Modhedan. We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back to Speak Your Mind on Gold FM and FBC TV. I'm Rita Narayan, and our guest today is Mrs. Arieta Modheida, Director for Women, and we're talking about developments within the ministry, in particular the Department of Women. Now, Mrs. Modheida, before the break, we were talking about the thematic area that looks at the equal participation of women in decision making. Now, and in the lead up to the elections, is there any thought given to the number of women that can participate in the political parties in Parliament?
Thank you, Rita. I believe my minister has made it very clear on several occasions that women will have to earn their participation on merit. It is really the prerogative of political parties, how many women they want. But as to temporary special measures, it is a ministry stance that women have to earn it on merit. Otherwise, you run the risk of token women coming on board who do a lot more damage than good, who will not be able to do the work. And it'll just give men the excuse to say, well, we told you so. We got their numbers and they couldn't even do it. They couldn't meet us halfway. There are a lot of competent, professional, intelligent women, assertive, that are very, very capable of getting on the political parties and getting involved.
Mm.
Thank you.
And what about in terms of training and mentoring program that the ministry is it considering providing to encourage women?
The bridge training has been we've told our divisionals, and the divisionals have identified, potential women leaders to attend the training, strong women leaders. And the minister is very clear. You don't want the fly-by-night operators. You don't want those with just the gift of the gab but don't work. They have to be women with proven track record at the community level who have done something and have been doing it for a while, and not just to be able to get a party ticket. Thank you.
Now, let's talk about the vision of the Department of Women going forward in terms of, again, empowering women in Fiji.
Right now, Rita, we've got new management. Our permanent secretary has just come on board. He's very much a change management agent. And so right now we're looking at the programs that have been in place since the start of this Women's Plan of Action, since 2010, and looking at the income generating projects. What have they yielded? And if they haven't yielded what we think they should have yielded, where are the problems, and let's fix it. So it's really about quality now, more than just quantity. But it is also about dealing with the handout mentality. It is about empowering them. That, we're bringing the training to your village. You can contribute a bit to your refreshments. Gone are the days of just, oh, poor, helpless me. There was something we heard up in Vonolevo where one of the villagers said, there's no poverty with us. We want to eat fish. We go out and, catch fish. They have fish and crabs, things that workers like us in Suva can't afford, or we can afford once a quarter. So there's no poverty in that sense, but maybe monetary poverty. So it's really looking at what exactly are you poor in? What are you rich in? What can you do to help use your strength to help, the weaknesses in the community? It's about caring for one another. It's about communities caring for each other. But also it's about getting women to own their voices. Women have a lot of power. They just don't realize it. And because they have a lot of power, men feel the need to suppress them. But if women are provided the right empowering environment, and men feel secure enough in themselves and not feel threatened, but realize that an empowered woman is a better woman and makes a better community, we'll have better development in the community. And I would just like to end with a saying that our permanent secretary told us when he first started, and you'll see it now on our Women's Resource Center boards. When you empower a woman, you empower a family, a community, and a nation. I go back to the basis of the Grameen Bank. If you will go Google the Grameen Bank in Bangladesh, it was built solely on giving credit to women, where Mr. Yunus Ali said, investing in women is smart investment. I've read a World Bank report that says investing in women is smart economics. And so giving women a little bit of money to do a little bit of something has greater gains for the community. And you've heard our PM, Commodore Banimarama, say that on so many occasions when he's opened centers and, the support towards women's empowerment. And so the evidence is out there. It's about women taking charge of their future, and it's about us providing that enabling environment. And right now, the environment is right, the policies are there, the legislation is there, the department is funded, well funded by government.
Mm-hmm. Now, perhaps before maybe we could just talk about one of the thematic areas, and that was access to basic services.
Mm-hmm.
And the sub-areas are health and HIV/AIDS, education, and other basic services like water, sanitation, housing, and transport. Perhaps you could talk about the work that's being done in that area?
Right now, Rita, I'll be very frank. We focus quite a fair bit on the other two that I talked about earlier, the income generating projects and the zero tolerance. We're just starting to pick up work on this access to services. And one of the projects is the solar electrification, is lights for villages. But we also understand unless women have a little bit of money in their pocket, unless there's a bit of peace in their lives, access and health centers are the last things on their mind. They want to be able to put a loaf of bread on the table. They want to be able to wake up and not worry about getting a black eye. Those are, very basic before they can even look at other things. But those are areas we work in collaboration with the divisional commissioners. When, letters come to us, complaining about lack of access to clean water, we get in touch with the divisional commissioners as per Pillar 7 of the People's Charter, integrated rural human resources development. We don't have all the expertise, nor do we have the human resources, but we have the technical agencies that we can work with to help us provide this to the women.
And are you able to sort of just give an indication on what kinds of projects we could see?
Right now, we're starting with awareness raising especially with the health and HIV and AIDS. With the others under access to services for lighting and water, the solar project is one of the major ones at the moment. With regards to water, we've really just worked with the divisional commissioners. We've had something that's come in from Madhuwata, and we've worked with the Office of the Commissioner Northern in the last few months. But in terms of the health and HIV and AIDS, we've taken the services out to the women when they've had their women's meetings. We've taken, reproductive health services out to them. We've just had the ILO fund to health and HIV/AIDS workshops in Levuka and Taviuni in the last 2 weeks.
Just to wrap up this program, Mrs. Modeda, just in terms of the direction that the department is taking.
Right now, the department is looking at improving the quality of our services, looking back over the last 5 years and where are the gaps, but also really looking at how can we really empower our women. There's a lot of talk about empowerment, a lot of talk, in our ACP, in our Women's Plan of Action. How do you really make it happen? But also, more importantly, how to make the income-generating projects sustainable, so that it's not only benefiting the women's groups, but the women individually. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your time, and we wish the Department of Women all the best. I'm Rita Naran, and we've come to the end of this program. Until next week.